We scanned the eastern skies all day, the bastards came the other way. We were spotting when they got us from behind.
Reviewing the events of 1950, the small-town weekly, the Lakeville Journal, wrote, "A new war started in Korea, but in the northwestern area of Connecticut, last year will probably be considered a very normal one." But that same newspaper also reported something that hardly seems normal: the formation of a Civil Defense Advisory Commission to plan what the town should do in the event of an enemy attack. Soon towns throughout Connecticut were organizing civil defense commissions. A month later, sandwiched in between accounts of a candlelight wedding and a women's society sewing meeting, the newspaper quoted a civil defense official in nearby Cornwall. "Civilian defense and Red Cross are getting prepared for any emergency as they are in all American towns and cities. We can only hope our preparations won't be needed, but we must be ready. We in the country don't expect atomic attack, but we must be ready to care for refugees and be able to send help to neighboring cities in case of need." This civil defense effort had been initiated by the military nearly a year before the outbreak of the Korean War. By early 1951, towns throughout Connecticut had set up observation posts to watch for enemy aircraft. Soon there were 94 active observation posts in Connecticut, one of 2 states to receive a citation from the Pentagon for the excellence of its program. The Connecticut posts were manned by some 5,000 observers, part of a National Ground Observer Corps of over 200,000 volunteers. Fred Bate, who ran the meat market in rural West Cornwall at the time, remembers the town's spotting post.
They had a little building there, and you could look out and you could hear them or see the lights blinking or something. You phone it in. And I suppose somewhere along the line somebody was charting the path of this thing as the different spotters picked it up. Seems to me you could volunteer for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever. Sometimes it would be a man and his wife, or just an individual would go up. And they had a little electric heater in there to keep you warm. It was a little insulated building. It wasn't too uncomfortable in the wintertime. They were really serious. You know, they were building bomb shelters around here, and they were there for a while. And they were figuring the Russians were going to come over and when things were hot and cold there. But that was a community thing. Everybody was involved in that.
I grew up in Cornwall during the 1950s, and I can testify that it was a community thing. I was too young to spot, but I remember my mother and my older brothers going off every week to do their stint. I remember our local grocer confessing that, even though you were supposed to be always on the alert, he actually used his spotting time to catch up on his reading. Incredibly, a town with a population of less than 1,200 managed to keep the post manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Civil defense officials singled out Cornwall as having almost 25% of its population enrolled in the Ground Observer Corps. I asked Mark Samant, a Cornwall artist who had been a spotter, what the atmosphere was that made such widespread participation possible.
Or was one of doing your duty, and if the country, needed us, we were right there to do our job.
But not everyone looked at it that way. Mark Samant's wife, Bee Samant, told me,
"I made myself very unpopular by refusing to spot, and I just felt as a matter of principle that they were creating a hysteria, anti-communist hysteria, to the point where they were sitting up there looking for planes, and I thought it was unhealthy."
Early in 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy had made his famous statement, "I have in my hand 57 cases of individuals in the State Department who would appear to be either card-carrying members or certainly loyal to the Communist Party." For B. Samant, the fears of Russian attack that led to spotting reflected the attitudes of McCarthyism. She recalls a meeting of the Connecticut Democratic Women's Club she attended in the early 1950s.
I was trying to say, talking about it and saying, it was absurd and that McCarthy was just working up all this frenzy and hysteria and the harm it was doing, and they didn't feel that way at all. They felt that, it was unpatriotic to criticize McCarthy. I think they thought we could be attacked at any moment by the Russians, and they felt that all these communist spies that we were unearthing were here to spy and to set up a war, that Russia would attack us.
Such doubts were reinforced by the questionable military effectiveness of the plane spotting program. What would happen, I remember people asking, if the Russians chose a cloudy day for their attack? In 1952, the Connecticut Office of Civil Defense itself circulated an estimate that despite radar screens, ground observers, and defensive aircraft, about 70% of attacking planes would get through to their targets. The widespread skepticism was reflected in a song made up by the well-known New Yorker magazine humorist James Thurber, a Cornwall resident, satirizing the devoted spotting of the town's leading families. Mark Samant, who was Thurber's illustrator, remembered and sang it for me.
We were spotting when they got us from behind. Oh, the Walkers and Calhouns, they were all a mass of ruins. We were spotting when they got us from behind. We scanned the eastern skies all day, the bastards came the other way. We were spotting when they got us from behind.
There can be little question that the motivation of those thousands of local spotters was primarily patriotic, with a smattering of socializing, heroics, and response to social pressure thrown in. But the national motivation for the establishment of the Ground Observer Corps is harder to define. It remains unclear how much it was fear of Russian attack, how much a desire to promote that fear. At the dawn of the nuclear age, Albert Einstein wrote, "The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything, save our modes of thinking." Faced with the threat of nuclear annihilation, people turned to outmoded techniques of defense that could provide little protection in the new world of the bomb. Techniques like climbing the hillside to spot for enemy bombers. In retrospect, their efforts appear neither heroic nor cynical, but rather pathetic in the kindest sense of that word. An attempt to ward off incomprehensible dangers with familiar remedies. Eventually, the spotting posts were closed down. Not even the most naive or the most gung-ho could believe they were worth the trouble in the age of the nuclear missile. But they should make us ask ourselves today, have we even now fully assimilated the implications of nuclear weaponry? Have we even now abandoned those attitudes and practices that make no sense in the post-Hiroshima world?